Hello, good morning. Thanks for inviting me on. The fact is that the last 13 years have seen the Conservative government's incompetence and neglect destroying our asylum system. So we're in a situation now where they're having to scramble to use hotels, to use barges, to use military bases. We're going to inherit a mess if we're privileged to form the next government, and we're going to have to fix that mess. We will do so as quickly as possible to get people out of hotels and off the barges and out of the military camps. But the reality is, on day one of a Labour government, we will have to deal with the infrastructure that we have and the complete chaotic, shambolic mess that the Conservative government will have left us.
So, Mr Kinnock, you would still use the barges then?
We'll be left with no choice but to deal with the mess that we inherit. But what we will have is a five-point plan that isn't based on headline-chasing gimmicks. It's based on hard grafts, quiet diplomacy and common sense. It's about scrapping the Rwanda scheme, which is unworkable, unaffordable, channeling that money into a cross-border police unit to crack down on the people smugglers. It's about sorting out the backlog, clearing that backlog by having a triage system for high grant rate countries and low grant rate countries, getting those people processed and removed if they have no right to be in our country. It's about getting a returns deal with the European Union, because we've seen the Conservatives destroying our relationship with our European partners and allies. Keir Starmer would rebuild those relationships, and it's about fixing the returns, the resettlement programs like Afghanistan, which are simply not working at all, and looking at the issue of family reunion as well. So rather than chasing headlines and ramping up the rhetoric, what we need is an approach that's based on common sense and quiet diplomacy and hard graft. And that's what Britain will get with a Labour government.
And we will get onto those resettlement schemes shortly, Mr Kinnock, but give us a timeline. Labour win the next general election, a timeline for how long you would use the barges for then?
Well, we want to return to a situation where no asylum decision takes more than 6 months to be made. So I'm confident that within 6 months of a Labour government, we would really get on top of that backlog, reducing it down to reasonable numbers so that the asylum estate that is properly set up for asylum seekers is being used. Of course, that is something that we would want to deal with as rapidly as possible so that we can get people out of the hotels using appropriate accommodation, getting people processed so that if they are genuine refugees, they can be given leave to remain, get on with their lives, working, contributing to our economy and society. And for those who are not genuine refugees, that they are removed rapidly from the country, because, of course, the removal system has also collapsed over the last 13 years. There are now 40,000 people in the UK who have been rejected as asylum seekers but have not been removed by this deeply incompetent government. So it's about just getting on top of the backlog, getting people off the barges. I'm not going to be able to do that. We're not going to be able to do that on day one. It is going to take some time, but it's going to take that leadership, that drive, that competence that's been so sorely missing for the last 13 years.
Have you been on board? Do you know what it's like? Would you be happy to stay on them?
I haven't been on to the barge. I have visited parts of the asylum estate. It's not that easy to get that engagement with this government, who just seem to be completely fixated on blaming everybody else, blame the lawyers, blame the judges, blame the European Union, blame the Labour Party. They even blame Gary Lineker. So it's not that easy to have that dialogue in a constructive manner with them. But we, of course, will be looking very closely at the entire contingency measures and the asylum estate in order to get people into appropriate accommodation, get the backlog cleared, crack down on the people smugglers, stop those channel crossings by getting that returns deal with the European Union. And I'm confident that within 6 months, if we're privileged to form a government, we could start to be seeing some real progress in all of these areas.
And Mr Kinnock, I will move on, but do you feel happy that you are going to be using these barges for the next 6 months if Labour were to get in power? Personally?
Deeply unhappy. This is the last thing that we would want to be doing, because we believe that people who are applying for asylum should be in appropriate accommodation. The hotels are costing the British taxpayer £6 million a day. That is money that could be channeled into far more useful causes in terms of our schools, our hospitals, helping to grow our economy. So it is a damning indictment of the incompetence of this government. But that is the reality. That is the mess that we are going to inherit right across the British economy and society and our immigration system. It's going to take some time to clear that mess up. But with that combination of hard graft and quiet diplomacy and common sense, a Labour government will achieve that goal as rapidly as possible.
OK, let's move on then. Tell us what you think of the government's partnership with tech companies. Presumably, this is something that you welcome.
Well, it's too little, too late. We tried to call for this 18 months ago. We had amendments to the Nationality and Borders Act, and the Conservative MPs voted it down. So it's right, it's welcome, but it's, once again, the Conservatives about 2 years behind the curve in terms of what the Labour Party is calling for. What is far more fundamental in terms of our concern is the Tories' bigger backlog bill, this new legislation, the Illegal Immigration Act,
yes,
which has now been given royal assent, which is actually going to cancel the government's ability to process people's claims. So that's going to increase the backlog and increase the attractiveness for the people smugglers, who'll be able to say, well, look, if you come across on a small boat, you're never going to get processed, you're never going to get returned or removed. So that will increase the attractiveness of the United Kingdom as a destination for people coming across on small boats, and the people smugglers will be laughing all the way to the bank.
Yeah, there's been a lot of war of the words, hasn't there, from both parties on this issue. It's going to be a big one next week, and as we lead up to that possible general election. But you've accused the government of cooking the books. Is that fair?
Yeah, what they've been doing, they're saying they're reducing the backlog, but all they're doing is artificially withdrawing claims, which means if somebody misses one appointment, they're immediately classified as withdrawn. It doesn't mean that they've been processed, either yes, you have leave to remain, or no, you are not a legitimate asylum seeker, you need to be removed from the country. It just puts people into limbo, and effectively then people are just slipping into the underground economy. The government's got no idea where they are and what they're doing. And that is the opposite of the right way to run our asylum system. So they are cooking the books in order to make the backlog numbers look better, but in fact all they're doing is artificially withdrawing people, making administrative decisions without processing them properly. It's completely outrageous, and the government needs to come clean on this point.
OK, Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock, thanks for your time.